right. Well, this good afternoon because I watched the inauguration. Happy Inauguration Day, as we inaugurated President Trump for his second term in office. And so I'm after this a little later, but I didn't want to miss it, of course. This is episode 159. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 21 through 31. And I entitled this David and Saul Separate. And that's really what this whole chapter is about. It has to deal with David and Jonathan speaking and trying to sort out what's going on and devising a plan to keep David safe. That's what's happening here. So Saul is after David. We know that, and he was paused for a minute because he was engaged in this prophesying. But in verse 1 of chapter 20 it says, "And David fled from Naioth, and Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done?" This is the question because he hasn't done anything. It's just that Saul is an angry, envious man. He's mentally imbalanced. He has this evil spirit of the Lord that comes upon him. There is no legitimate answer for this other than my dad isn't thinking clearly, and he is a vengeful, envious man. Oftentimes those are the circumstances because you're looking for something that you might be able to do to repair. Oftentimes this is exactly the way Christians think. They think if there's tension between two, maybe it's something that I have done. Now I'm not saying it couldn't be something you've done that needs to be straightened up. But oftentimes it's got nothing to do with you. There's been no offense. People can just dislike you and even hate you for no reason. And that's what's happening here. We're talking about a national hero. It's David. David has done nothing but care for the king. But the people love him. He's envious of him. And so it's the total depravity of man. It's the sinfulness of man that he just hates David. So David asks this question that we all ask sometimes about tension that exists between people. And you can ask the Lord. I mean, what have I done? And the point is here, David has done nothing to deserve this. He says, what have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father that he seeketh my life? And he says, and he said unto him, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it me. That is Jonathan saying, whatever Dad does, he'll tell me, and then I can tell you to keep you safe. That's what this is all about. So Jonathan, in this stage, doesn't really answer the question. He just says, I'll be an advocate for you. And that's what we have in the verses that follow. I'm not going to read it all, but they're trying to sort out now whether or not it's safe for David to come back to the throne room. And so this is the passage of Scripture where Jonathan and David concoct this plan where David is going to hide in the bushes in the field, and Jonathan is going to shoot an arrow, and depending on what he says, David will know the situation back in the palace. If he says the arrow is on this side and you'll come back, then David will know it's safe to return. But if he tells the young man who's chasing the arrow, it's beyond you, you got to go a little further, then David will know that it's not safe to come back. And we know how that story goes. He goes out to shoot the arrows, and he says the arrow is beyond you, and so David knows it's no longer safe because his advocate, his true friend Jonathan, has told him, you just can't come back because Dad is dead set on killing you. All right, if you come back, he's just going to kill you. This is the story. This is why it's David departing from Saul. He can't go back because Saul wants to kill him. And then there's an interesting thing here, and I want you to keep this in mind because David does this when he's the king. Because someone's going to come to David, the story, I should have looked it up, and say that I have persecuted or killed part of Jonathan's family. And David says, oh, you think that's a good thing? I made a promise to my best friend that I would look after his family. So he has that guy put to death. It's right here that Jonathan asks David when he comes to the throne to care for his family that is going to live on. He says, but also, this is verse 15, but also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever, from my family, from my kids and their kids. All right? When you're on the throne, I'm asking you to look after my family. All right? He said, No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. And the point is, after you've won the victory and all the enemies are gone, because he knows this is the direction that David is going, I need you to look after my family, which David covenants or makes this solemn promise to do. And then it says in verse 17, and Jonathan caused David to swear again because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. It's just a very wonderful relationship. Best of best friends is what we're talking about here. And then the passage that follows is the shooting of the arrows. And in verse 21 it says, behold, the arrows are on this side of thee, take them, then come thou, for there is no peace to thee or hurt, as the Lord liveth. It says, but if I say thus unto the young man, behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away. And that's what happens here. In the passage that follows, David is used to eating dinner with the king at the king's table, and he doesn't show up. And Jonathan makes excuses for him. And then it says this in verse 30. I just want you to see, for all those, again, I make this case about how you have to, endorse everybody that's in authority over you. This has to be driven from our minds as Americans. Authority over you must be just. It must be legal. God does not endorse tyranny. If you disagree with that, please write me. Please write me and say that God endorses tyranny, and in the Bible, make the case for this. Print it so we're not just in between. I know exactly what you're saying. For all of those that argue that God endorses tyranny, the murder of Stalin and Lenin and Mao and Hitler, that God approves of this because of Romans 13. I want to hear it from you. I want you to write it down for me. And if you can't write it down, I'd appreciate it if you never say those words again. Because Saul is the king. And now listen to the king. Listen to the king. This is to his own boy. And Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, because Jonathan is on the side of David against his dad. You see, now some might say, oh, see, there's rebellion. The son is in the home, he's on the side of David against the true king. Except we know he's not. He's been abandoned by God, but he's still in the position of the king. All of these things have to be factored into your evaluation of what I'm about ready to say, all right? And Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said unto him, thou son of a perverse, rebellious woman. That's what he says to his own boy. He's also a national hero because of the great victory that was run against the Philistines there, right? Climbing the mountain and all of that. His dad was going to kill him because he ate honey, when the command was of his dad, of the king, was nobody eats anything till I vindicated myself with the Philistines. Another absolutely ridiculous thing. Kings can say ridiculous things, all right? The reason that we bow is because we're afraid, because they have the authority of the civil government. That's why we bow, because kings can say, and kings, anybody in authority can say absolutely ridiculous things, all right? He says, he calls him the son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do not I know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion? Don't I already know that you're on the side of David? Because if David's going to be the king, you're not going to be. Jonathan's already conceded this. We're not going to go back over this. This is not a big deal with Jonathan. Jonathan understands the way God works, and he just wants to be part of the plan, and he loves David, and David loves him. So when Saul says this, Saul thinks Jonathan should be thinking like him. You just have to pause for a minute. You do not want to think like these people, because they want to wedge you into a perspective where Jonathan is going to support this, mentally challenged spirit, wicked, evil spirit comes upon him from the Lord, envious dad. Am I supposed to side with him to stay on the right side of the civil government? You see, and the answer to that is no. He says, he calls him the son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do not I know that thou hast chosen the son Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness, that is, from your conception. That the whole idea you were born to be the king, and look at what you're doing. Obviously, you've lost your mind, Jonathan. Oh no, Jonathan's not lost his mind. You see, Saul has lost his mind. He says, for as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom, which is absolutely true. This is not news to Jonathan. He's a grown man. He's smart. He knows what's happening. Yes, Dad, I know. This would have been tough because he's gonna follow his dad to death, to his death at the end of this book. They're gonna all be killed on the same day by the Philistines. One of the saddest chapters because he's gonna be loyal to his father because his father is the king, even though the king is so far off the rails. It is a remarkable thing about how the son is going to just stand by his dad as a captain and a member of the Israeli army, knowing full well that the grace and mercy of God has departed from his father. It says, and then it says after all of this, he said, and Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, wherefore shall he be slain? What has he done? See, there's his comeback. Why do you want to kill him? Why are we even having this discussion? What has he done to you? Right? Listen, this next verse is telling. Every verse in the Bible needs to be there. So he asks the question. You know what the answer is? It says, and Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that he was determined of his father to slay David. He didn't come away from that saying, Dad's determined to kill me, even though he did. You see, when you get done talking, violence is all that happens here on the part of Saul. This is Saul. I mean, and David can't go back. And I just want you to know, the reason David's not going back is because of this chapter, chapter 20. It says, so Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger. This is righteous anger. There's another example of it. When it says, he says, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, or be slow to wrath in James. Because there should be slow to wrath. Here it's obviously slow to wrath because he just had a javelin thrown at him. He says, so Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and didn't eat no meat the second day of the month. That is, he's fasted. For he grieved for David because his father had done him shame. He's treating him shamefully. Why? Because he's not done anything. He has done nothing wrong. And still his dad is after him. All right. So they did the arrow thing. And he had to run, and he tells the guy that was holding his weapons, they call it artillery here, excuse me, and he tells him to go, and then it says, in verse 41, and as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of his place to the north, fell on his face to the ground, bowed himself 3 times, they kissed each other and wept one another until David exceeded. That is, they're heartbroken that this is happening between friends. But David's got to go. All right. And Jonathan said to David, go in peace. For as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. That is it. There's been a covenant between these guys that David is going to support after he's the king. You do not want to mess with Jonathan's kids. Now, I hope that rings in your mind as we get through this a little further. And Jonathan went to his city. And that is chapter 20. I did it quickly, briefly, but that's the substance of this. Saul is not going to concede. Saul is off the rails. Jonathan is in the middle. Jonathan is putting his own life at risk by David. David and Jonathan are best of best friends. They devise a plan to get the word out that whether you can come back or not. And the answer is no, you can't, because he tried to kill me. Jonathan says, well, he tried to kill me, then for sure he's going to try to kill David. All right, it's escalating. It's just absolutely escalating until Saul begins to treat David as an enemy, like he was a Philistine. He goes after David. He chases down at David, tries to surround David, capture David, kill David. This is the beginning of the whole David is hiding out with the Philistine stories. All this stuff coming up because the king of the nation, which he saved, I mean, there on the battlefield with Goliath, has won many military battles for him. I mean, he's married to the king's daughter, to Michal. I mean, that he is served in the army. Samuel loves him. He went to Samuel and Ramah, and we're in Sheila there, where they discuss how we're going to manage this, and Jonathan is in there too. The one guy that is really wrong in all of this is Saul, and it just so happens that the one guy that is really, really wrong is the king. So he has power, all right? that's what's happening here. So that's the end of chapter 20. So I think I hit most of the high stuff, but no, Saul wants nothing to do with him, so David's on his own. Chapter 21 tomorrow, because this is Monday. Tomorrow is one of these horrible passages in God's Word, and justice is done here later as well. What happens here is just terrible, and so that's tomorrow, chapter 21. All right, this is just kind of moving us from the throne room on his own, and then chapter 21. This is what happens when David gets on the run. All right. Well, the Lord bless you, and have a great day. And Lord willing, we'll see everybody tomorrow. Okay, we'll see you.